This is where we left off according to my notes. Can everybody see the orange PowerPoint? Superb. All right, so we're going to be talking about thinking and language, with the first section being thinking. Eventually, when we get to language, we're going to talk about it not just in like the view of how a baby learns how to talk, but also the meanings and the semantics and the syntax of language and how it develops in our brain. With thinking, we're going to look at both logical thinking and illogical thinking, including biases like cognitive dissonance or an anchoring bias or confirmation bias. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the way our brain works right, but also the way our brain trips us up. And that's something that's not specific to any particular group or age group. That's something that's just a human trait that we're going to see in this unit. Okay, so first, if we're going to talk about thinking, we have to define what thinking is. The fancy word for thinking is cognition. What is cognition? It's a mental activity where you're trying to understand information and communicate information. So you're taking in info and you're giving out info. And this is a whole branch of psychology. This is kind of the antithesis, the reaction to behaviorism. Remember that in behaviorism, they say science can only be what is measurable and quantifiable. It has to be objective. So we can look at behaviors, for instance, but we can't look at what someone was thinking. Well, cognitive psychologists are going to rebuke that. They're going to say, no, actually, in addition to looking at operant and classical conditioning and modeling, there's some things you can't explain through the behaviorist perspective. So we have to look at what's happening up in our noggin. Like if you look at insight learning, okay? Insight learning where it's not trial and error. It's not watching someone else solve the problem. It's just you have a light bulb moment in your brain that's like, oh, here is the solution to the issue that I'm struggling with. So in this particular branch of psychology, they're going to be studying concept formation, including schema, okay, and mental sets, so scripts that we follow day to day in certain situations, problem solving, and how we do that effectively, and how we are hindered by previous experiences, like if we're talking about convergent thinking versus divergent thinking, which are some of your ID terms, decision making and how we make decisions, and judgment formation. So how do we end up with the thoughts that we have, and why do we tend to stick with certain thoughts that objectively probably aren't true or aren't logical? Okay, so again, we're going to look at both logical thinking, so how evolutionarily the cognition has helped us as a species, but also illogical thinking, how there are flaws in how we make judgments or how we make decisions. Okay, so some vocabulary terms that you're going to need to be familiar with for this include concepts. A concept is a mental grouping, and we tend to group things a lot. If y'all remember Gestalt psychology, it's talking about the grouping of things based on similarities, based on proximity, based on connectedness, right? So we tend to already kind of categorize things naturally. So concepts are mental groupings of objects, events, or people. Like if you look at an address, you might group people by zip codes. You might group people by what country they're from, or what city they're from, or what neighborhood they're from. And in fact, with these concepts and these categories, we develop prototypes. Proto meaning first, and type meaning obviously type. So a prototype is the best example of a concept or a category. Y'all may have been around young children, although in my experience, I try not to be around young children. That's just like a personal life choice of mine. They're so small and they ask so many questions, and I don't know the answer. So I'm just like, Google it. And of course you go through this weird internet thing where eventually it leads you back to like Hitler or something. So anyway, with prototypes with children, you may have been around small children when they're first learning about the world. And say, for instance, there's a dog in the house. And so their parents have to teach them what a dog is. And so if you think about the characteristic of what is a dog, you think, okay, they have fur, they walk on four legs, they have a tail. And so their category of dog fits all of those descriptions. Well, let's say that then their mom gets a kitten. So they point at the cat and they say, ah, dog. And then the mom has to explain, no, actually, this is a different animal. I know it has a tail. I know it has 4 legs. I know it has fur, but this is not the same as a dog. And then they're driving around and they pass by cows and they're like, haha, dog. Like, no, that is a cow. So you have this prototype for what is an animal, what is a dog, and then you have to accommodate new information and build new categories. Okay? So we have frequently experienced features, and so we categorize them into those prototypes, or with the addition of new information, we create new categories. For instance, Plato in the Academy said that, like, they're trying to define what is a man. And Plato said that man is a featherless biped. Biped meaning you walk on 2 legs and we don't have feathers, which is true, right? We walk on 2 legs and we don't have feathers. Well, another philosopher who wakes up every day and chooses chaos is Diogenes. Okay, he was the guy who he was laying in the sun and Alexander the Great came up to visit him and was like, I'll give you anything that you want. Just tell me what you want. And he told Alexander the Great, I want you to move out of the way of the sun because I'm tanning here. Like, he would live in a bucket and he would eat onions like apples. Like, he was a really interesting dude. He would have gone viral. So this is very on brand for him. So Diogenes heard about what Plato was saying and was like, aha, I'm going to bring a man to class tomorrow. So he comes back to the academy with a chicken that he has plucked all the feathers off, and he holds it up before the other philosophers and says, behold, a man. Because a chicken does technically walk on 2 legs, and if you take its feathers away, it is featherless, right? So that is just an example of where they had to build upon the characteristics in that category. So they added in, okay, well, they also have fingers with flat nails. Okay, so narrowing down that prototype for what is a man versus what is not a man or a human. Yeah, someone in the chat's like, they're definitely trying to start some serious chaos. Yeah, you got to mix it up a little bit sometimes. All right, now we've already talked about cognitive maps before and the concept of latent learning, where you build maps of your environment so you know where's the bathroom, where's the living room, or if you're walking through a maze. And then once you are incentivized to show that learning, you have behavior that's associated with that. But we also have cognitive maps for situations, not just for locations, but for different situations that we may be in. Okay, so for instance, if you're answering the phone at a friend's house, you may answer it a little differently than if you're answering your own phone. Like, you may answer your own phone and you just be like, what? Okay, whereas if you're answering at your friend's home phone line, you might pick up and say, so-and-so residence, may I ask who's calling? Okay, so you have different scripts, okay, different context for what you're supposed to do in different situations. Like, when I first started working here, whenever the phone would ring from the front office, I had to stop myself from saying the word control, because I'd been used to, from being a correction officer for 4 years, I was used to being in the control room and picking up the phone whenever they would ring a door to say, control, what do you need? Toilet paper? Do you need, like, door 32 open? Things like that. So I had to relearn to say, oh, McNeely, instead of control. So there's different situations where you have different cognitive maps to get through that situation. Y'all are probably looking at this picture and like, why does her phone have a tail? It's like, because we used to have phones with landlines where you have to actually connect it to the wall and you couldn't leave the phone. We also had dial-up internet. I came from the Neolithic time period. Are we good so far? All right. So how do we get around with all of these different categories? Well, we have to make inferences. As new information comes in, we have to accommodate it and add it to our previous knowledge. Okay, so to help us figure out an episode or a situation, we do have some tools like schema and scripts. So schema is a general framework that gives you expectations about, say, a topic or an event or people or situations. Like, you may act different at a funeral than you would at a wedding. Like, even just in terms of what you wear. If you wear black to a wedding, you're saying something, right? If you wear white to a wedding, or that, yeah, that would be a bad move because you're not supposed to be wearing white to a wedding. That's somebody else. But in some different cultures, you may wear white to a funeral, whereas in Western culture, you wear black to a funeral, right? You may mourn publicly or you may mourn privately. You may have a big funeral or you may have a small funeral or wedding. Okay, so we have different schema that's based on our cultural understandings for how do we go through different environments. And within those schemas, we have certain scripts that we follow. Okay, these are actions that we expect to happen. So for instance, if I go into a grocery store today, okay, before I get out of my car, I put on my mask. And let's say I go to Aldi's. So I put on my mask and I go ahead and fish out a quarter, right? Because I know going into an Aldi's, they have those carts where you have to put in a quarter in order to get it. Okay, or I have to remember to bring my own bags, things like that. If I go through a grocery store and I see people not wearing a mask, then I feel uncomfortable because that is not following the expected script for this particular schema. But let's say a year ago today, if I was walking around in a Walmart wearing a mask, people might be like, what's going on with that lady? Why is she wearing a mask in the middle of Walmart? We don't do that. Or if you walk into a bank wearing a mask, they might be like, hey, keep an eye on that one. Okay, whereas today, you're supposed to. Or if you're going into a restaurant, you walk up to the hostess, especially if you're going to a really fancy restaurant like the Olive Garden, okay? You go up to the hostess and you wait for her to seat you. Then when your waiter comes up, you order a drink. You don't immediately order a dessert or your entree. There's a certain order and a script to things, okay? Does that make sense? Now, what do we do when we get information that is new to us, when it doesn't fit a schema or a concept or a prototype that we already have? Well, a simulation is when we take that incoming information and we apply it to something we already understand. Remember that with semantic memory, if you're trying to build your memory through semantic measures, that you connect something to something you already know, because you already have neurons that are established in your brain. So that means it connects faster and it fires faster. Okay, so incoming information, you try to translate it based on previous knowledge. For instance, oh, my voice is breaking. When I teach, I try to connect aspects of psychology to real life events, like with the idea of the script. I don't just tell you the definition of script is blah, 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 blah. I give you an example. I apply it to something you're familiar with, like mask wearing or sitting down at a restaurant, okay? With accommodation, this is where you have to change your current knowledge because of new information. Like with the example of a child learning about a dog versus a cat versus a llama versus a dog. Okay, you have new information where you have to build new categories. Okay, different species, different groups. For instance, I don't know the different species of cars, and at this point I'm too embarrassed to ask. So do I know the difference between a Corolla and a Camry? I do not. I know that they are a car. I know that they have wheels and they have doors and they go. All right, but can I tell the difference between a car and a truck? Yes, I can make that category. Or a truck and an SVU? Yes, I can make that category. Now, if I see a Tesla, like a Cybertruck, that's probably going to fit in a whole different category. I probably wouldn't call that a car or a truck or SUV. I would just say that's another one of Elon Musk's brain children. Okay. For instance, y'all may have been familiar with SAQs with ACE, but in this class, instead of SAQs, you had FRQs. So instead of using ACE as your acronym, you had to use TAD. You adapt your current knowledge to new experiences. That is accommodation. All right, so when we're faced with problems, when we don't know the answer to something, we typically have two steps that we could take. We could use an algorithm or we could use a heuristic. Now, heuristics are going to be the ones that we use the most because they are faster. If you've ever heard the phrase rule of thumb, that's basically what a heuristic is. It is a shortcut to help us solve problems. What do we already know about the situation, and can we guess? Whereas an algorithm is problem solving where it is guaranteed a correct outcome, but you have to apply it correctly each time. For instance, when we write FRQs, I give y'all an algorithm. I say if you answer T and A and D, then you'll get the points. Now, does that mean if you attempt to answer? No, this means if you answer it correctly. Did you use the term? Did you use the correct definition for that term? Did you apply it to the specific situation in the question? If you follow these steps, if you follow this algorithm, you'll get the points. Okay, compare that to heuristic. All right, with an algorithm, you're guaranteed the right answer. With a heuristic, you kind of sort of maybe get the right answer, maybe you don't. For instance, an example of this is if you're taking a multiple choice test, right, and you have a Scantron, and you bubble in A for number 1, and then number 2, the answer is A again, and then number 3, the answer is A. You start getting suspicious, right? You're like, this entire test can't beat the letter A. Although one day I want to do that, just one class, so they can't tell others like, oh, the answers are all A. I want to make the entire thing just A the whole way down and just watch people get spicy armpits. Or do the ABCD CBA, like the back and forth zigzag. That would be so aesthetically pleasing. But there'd be somebody who's like, it can't be right. So if you're bubbling in A for number 1, A for number B, A for number C, you might think, this probably isn't right. I don't know what the answer is for number 4, but I haven't put C in a while, so I'm going to put C. How many of y'all done that where you're like, I don't know the answer, so C is the answer? Okay, yeah. Okay, that is an example of a heuristic. It is a shortcut. It is a rule of thumb. Oh, somebody said Colvin did that for your midterm freshman year. What? They were all the answer A, or was it the zigzag? It was the zigzag. I love Colvin. What a perfect human being. He woke up that day and chose violence. One day you want to wake up and choose chaos. My life is already chaotic enough at this point, so I'm just making it day to day. I wake up in the morning and I'm just like, okay, another day, another dollar. Literally $1 before taxes. Y'all laugh, but it's not funny. So, algorithm, a methodical, logical rule that guarantees a solution. This is going to take a long time. So we don't use algorithms that often because we're not computers and we want things now. For example, in the video I'm about to show, Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory comes up with an algorithm for making friends, and it involves a flow chart where you do step 1, step 2. If they say yes to this, then you go on to the next one. So you make the phone call. Are they home? Yes. Would you like to share a meal? If they say yes, then you dine together. If they say no, then do you enjoy a hot beverage? If they say yes, then you say tea, coffee, or cocoa. Begin friendship. Okay, so you have all of these different ways to make a friendship with somebody, but we prefer to just do the quick way of, do I like this person or not? Are they in close proximity to me on a regular basis or not? Do I share classes with them or live in the same neighborhood or share the same interests? We don't go through this whole flow chart for how we do friendships. And so now I'm going to move us over to the YouTube video. We're going to watch that real quick. Another example of algorithm versus heuristic is if you're trying to find some place to eat, like let's say that you're driving around in a new town and you don't know what's good or what's not good. A heuristic might be, I'm going to go to McDonald's because I've gone to McDonald's a lot in my lifetime, and it's the same thing pretty much wherever you go. A Big Mac is a Big Mac in Montgomery or Los Angeles, although they might often like a vegan option in Los Angeles probably. And so a heuristic would be, I know that fast food is pretty much the same no matter where I go, so I'm just going to go ahead and go to that Wendy's. Now, does that guarantee that the food that you get at Wendy's is going to be good? No, you could get food poisoning. Okay, but that's why it's a shortcut. It's not a. That's why it's a heuristic. An algorithm would be if you stopped on the side of the road, got out your phone, and started doing Yelp reviews and ranking each restaurant in a 50-mile radius or a 10-mile radius. And you're like, okay, well, this one got 4 stars and it had 1,000 reviews. This one had 5 stars, but only has 2 reviews. And you started ranking it. Like, nobody has time to do that. They're just like, yeah, I'm going to wing it. Or if you're driving by a restaurant and you see that there's a bunch of cars, you might think, they must have really good food. Like right outside Lamp, the Simply Southern Cafe, yeah, they've got good plates. That place is always packed. Like you see people lined up, socially distanced outside, waiting to get in so they can get that food. Like it's good stuff. So that would be my shortcut. That would be my heuristic. Do I want to try Simply Southern Cafe if I've never tried it before? Well, it certainly looks popular. Oh no, y'all, juicy seafood. Okay, now my shortcut for restaurants would be not to eat at a place that has the word juicy in it, especially with the definitive article. It's like the juicy seafood. That's like the Montgomery Academy. Like it's a little bit too fancy. It's like you can't say the and then juicy right after that. Okay, but I've gone, okay, and it is great. I love juicy seafood. Like I know that there have been people posting on Facebook like, oh, they have roaches. I'm like, yeah, so what? It's good food. Waffle House has roaches. But you don't expect a Waffle House to be clean. Okay? You don't go to a Waffle House because you're like, yes, I bet they scored a 100 on their cleanliness inspection. You go to Waffle House because it's 2 a.m. and it's the only place open. Yeah, I love Wahoo. So let's go ahead and watch this video about Sheldon Cooper and his algorithm.
I believe I've isolated the algorithm for making friends.
Sheldon, there is no algorithm for making friends.
Hear him out. If he's really onto something, we could open a booth at Comic-Con, make a fortune. My initial approach to Kripke had the same deficiencies as those that plagued Stu the Cockatoo when he was new at the zoo.
Stu the Cockatoo? Yes, he's new at the zoo.
It's a terrific book. I've distilled its essence into a simple flowchart that will guide me through the process.
Have you thought about putting him in a crate while you're out of the apartment?
Hello, Kripke. Sheldon Cooper here. It occurred to me that you hadn't returned any of my calls because I hadn't offered any concrete suggestions for pursuing our friendship. Yet perhaps the two of us might share a meal together. I see. Well, then perhaps you'd have time for a hot beverage. Popular choices include tea, coffee, cocoa. I see. No, wait, don't hang up yet. But what about a recreational activity? I bet we share some common interests. Tell me an interest of yours. Really? On actual horses? Tell me another interest of yours. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I have no desire to get in the water till I absolutely have to. Tell me another interest of yours.
Uh-oh, he's stuck in an infinite loop.
I can fix it.
But it's interesting, but isn't ventriloquism by definition a solo activity? Yeah. Tell me another interest of yours. Is there any chance you like monkeys? What is wrong with you? Everybody likes monkeys. Hang on, Kripke. A loop counter and an escape to the least objectionable activity. Howard, that's brilliant. You saw that.
Gee, why can't Sheldon make friends?
Right, Kripke, that last interest strikes me as the least objectionable, and I would like to propose that we do that together. Tomorrow. Yes, I'll pay. Bye. All right. To learn rock climbing.
Okay. All right, so heuristic. Remember that these are shortcuts and they are more efficient than using an algorithm like what we saw with Sheldon Cooper. But there are still some problems with heuristics. They are speedier, which is a plus. They are more efficient, which is a plus, but they're also not guaranteed to be correct. So that is a negative. Say, for instance, if I stop at a Wendy's because I think, oh yeah, this will be fine because I've been to Wendy's before, this is my shortcut, and I eat the a 4 for 4 and I get food poisoning. Or y'all, did you hear about the Hot Pockets? Hot Pockets got recalled because they have glass in them, and it's in the pepperoni ones. Like, those are the best ones. So of course that's the one with glass in it. So it's not the actual Hot Pocket that's burning your throat and like messing up your throat. It's actually glass in it. So throw those away if you have them, or give them to me, yellow. I've had worse food. So with that, we do have the issue of coming up with the wrong solution if we use a heuristic, because it is a shortcut, just like picking C as an answer choice because you haven't picked C in a while. Okay, just because the last 3 answers were C doesn't mean that that negates the fact that the next answer would be C. Or if your family always has boys, like no one in the family for 3 generations has ever had a girl, well, does that mean that you're guaranteed to have a boy or have a son? No, because it's always a 50-50 chance. Okay, so there is no impact from those previous generations. It's always been 50-50. You're just using the heuristic of, well, my family, it's always been boys, so I'm not having a daughter, right? Biology, we're doing cross curriculum. So with this particular example of algorithm versus heuristic, if you're going to unscramble this word and use an algorithm, then there would be almost almost a million. Okay, that's right? Almost a million combinations where you'd have to start with, okay, let's do every single combination of the letter S first. Let's do every single combination of the letter P first. Let's do the first one for letter L. Okay, and if you went through a chart or you went through an Excel sheet doing every single one of those combinations, it would take you forever with very little payoff. Okay, but if you use a heuristic of, I'm assuming that this scrambled word is in English, and in English, I can't think of a single word that has Y and Y next to each other, then you would throw out any possible answers that have Y and Y next to each other. What's another shortcut that we could use with these particular letters to figure out what it is spelling? Okay, yeah, I see in the chat someone said ology. Okay, we have a lot of words that end with ology: biology, philosophy, sociology, psychology. Oh, wait, would any of those fit? So let's take out O-L-O-G-Y. We have P-S-Y-C-H. Okay, so you could figure out that this spells psychology just by knowing, okay, Y and Y aren't going to go together, and I see ology, so it's the study of something. Let's see what letters are left over. Another thing that you could do is, like, if you're playing one of those games on your phone where it scrambles the letters, you can just hit like reshuffle. Like if you're playing Scrabble, you have the option to reshuffle the tiles to see if you can see it in a different perspective to find a word. Okay, that was a lot faster than me saying, okay, everybody, start scrambling these letters in an Excel sheet until you get the right answer, right? All right, another way that we solve problems is through insight. So y'all may remember insight learning from Wolfgang Kohler, okay, where it wasn't a matter of behaviorism, where they were watching somebody else solve the problem and then modeling the behavior, or it wasn't a matter of operant or classical conditioning. It was a matter of pure insight, where you have that light bulb moment. So an example of try to get to the food. You don't have any tools to reach it, to hit it. You can't jump and get it, but you have these boxes around you. So eventually you learn to stack them, and that gets you to the appropriate height to get that banana. I actually had this happen to me in, not to get bananas or food, but in McIntyre's class, Baker and I have this thing where I have a picture of my first year when I was here as a teacher. So it's like my yearbook photo from that first year. And they gave you like all these free printouts because it was your first one. So I got like the big one, and I just started like taping it in his room. So it was on his window for like a year or so. And then he started moving it. So he would hide it in places like behind McIntyre's door. And then I would take it and hide it somewhere in his room, like in his laptop or in his coffee grounds, right? And so recently he took it and put it at the top of the column in McIntyre's room, assuming that I wouldn't be able to reach it because I'm too short. So what did I do? I just put a desk next to the column and climbed on that and got it down. Okay, so insight learning. How do I solve this issue with what's in my environment. Okay? So insight is the sudden and often new realization of a solution. It just comes out of nowhere. This is different from trial and error. It's different from behaviorism with modeling. Okay? But you also have some issues that interfere with your problem solving, because if we had these tools that guaranteed a right answer every time, then we would have zero problems in our lives, and that is not the case. So one of those flaws with problem solving includes confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for information that already confirms what you already believe. So you're only going to look at examples that confirm what you already think. And social media is really bad about this, right? So if you're on Facebook, which I know like none of you probably are, but if you're on Facebook and you start unfriending people that believe differently than you, then you're going to create an echo chamber where you're only going to have yes men. You're only going to have people that tell you what they think you want to hear or what you already believe. Okay? But even beyond just looking at like social media and confirmation bias, you could look at this as even in your relationships with other people. For instance, if you ever have a crush on somebody, okay, you might have confirmation bias because you're only going to see their good qualities and you may ignore their red flags, right? So there may be a ton of different flaws, like jokes that they make, or maybe they bring a coupon to the first date or something like that, and or you're like, you split a 4 for 4, but you have such a crush on them that you're only going to look at the good and you're going to ignore the bad. That is an example of confirmation bias. And the reason that we do this is because we want to avoid cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is really uncomfortable. It does not feel good. Okay, cognitive dissonance is when your worldview, it comes up against something that proves or shows that what you believe isn't accurate. Okay, so you may have gone all this time believing that something is true and there's evidence to the contrary. So what do you do to avoid that uncomfortable feeling of you might be wrong? You ignore that evidence. You ignore anything that makes you question your own beliefs. Okay, and that's what leads to confirmation bias. Okay, an example for this is y'all probably heard of the anti-vaxxer movement that's been going on for years now, where there was this study that came out saying that there was a causational relationship between vaccines and autism. Well, we know that causation and correlation are two different things. And that study, that one particular study that was not peer-reviewed, was withdrawn for having flaws in its operational definitions. Okay, so there is no evidence that vaccines cause autism. However, okay, there is some correlation with the diagnosis of autism. At what age do children typically get diagnosed? And the vaccine schedules. At what age do children get their MMR vaccines? And so people correlate the two and say, oh, the vaccine must have caused autism, when in reality, you just start noticing the symptoms and getting diagnoses of autism at the same age where you might be getting vaccines. Trace brings up in the chat essential oils. Yeah, so if you already believe that essential oils can help you with a medical issue, then you might be more likely to double down on that. Okay, or an example from when I was coming up in college. Back when I was coming up in college, vaping just started. Okay, so we had just started the whole vaping thing. And you start seeing them popping up everywhere. And everyone's just like, vaping is healthier. Vaping isn't bad for your health. Even though there was evidence coming out saying, there's this thing called popcorn lung, and spoiler alert, it's not fun. Okay, because there are all these people that started picking up vaping. Like, they weren't smokers trying to quit smoking or have a healthier alternative. They were just doing it to do it, right? So you see that teenagers, especially, there are higher rates of tobacco use with vaping as a result because of like marketing and things like that. And so if you are like in the vaping business, like you started a company or you started vaping yourself, then you're likely to ignore those articles talking about popcorn lung. Okay, or those articles talking about people who happen to have like lung failure or heart failure due to a specific oil that was used in those vapes. Okay, because you don't want to challenge your world view. Someone in the chat said that reminds me of conspiracy theorists. Yeah. Okay, because one of the infinite loops that conspiracy theorists get caught in is that if there's no evidence that they're right, they say that, oh, this is just evidence that there is a conspiracy because there's a cover up. So, yeah, it's not obvious that this is going on, because if it's obvious, it's not a conspiracy. So it just starts this infinite feedback loop of they're covering it up so well that it must be true. And that's evidence that there is something going on. Okay, and it's really hard to counter that, because even if you bring up facts and you bring up evidence, there's always that way to go back into that echo chamber. Okay. Next, with fixation. Fixation is where you only have convergent thinking. Okay. Convergent thinking is when you only see one solution to a problem. Divergent thinking is much more creative, where you can come up with multiple solutions to a problem. So let's say, like, if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. Okay, so you want to impose that solution on everything, right? So you can't see it from a fresh perspective or from new eyes. And this is going to keep you from solving some of those problems, because you have especially functional fixedness. Functional fixedness is when we only see an item as being used with its intended purpose, right? Like, let's say I have a screwdriver, okay, but I need to nail something into the wall. Well, I say, well, I don't have a hammer. All I have is a screwdriver, so I'm stuck. I can't fix this. Well, what if you just turn the screwdriver around and use the butt of it to hammer in the nail? Or what if you get a book and you use that to hammer in the nail? There is a solution to that problem. Or I had a student who emailed me, hey, I can't take the test in 15 minutes because I spilled a drink on my computer. And I'm like, okay, well, do you have a phone? Do you have a tablet? And they're like, oh yeah, I do have a tablet. Let me take the test on that. So like this fixedness of, oh, I can only take my test on a computer. Like, no, you can take it on any device that connects to the internet. You just have to get out of that box and start thinking divergently rather than convergently. Are we good so far? Okay, so we're going to use this in a very famous example of the matchstick problem. Okay, the question is, you need to form 4 equal triangles. Okay, so that means that all the sides are the same. You can't have like an isosceles, okay, where one side is bigger than the other side. They all have to be equal. You need to form 4 of these using 6 matches. Okay, now if you don't have matches, like we're at school right now, instead you could use pencils. So I want y'all to take a minute, especially y'all that are face-to-face, grab some pens or pencils out of your pouch, and I have some pens and pencils back there, and get 6 of them. And I want you to try to create 4 equal triangles using those 6 pens or pencils. And those of you who are at home, if you have something that's like a matchstick or something that's long and cylindrical, do the same thing. Try to use 6 of those items to create 4 triangles. And let's see if anyone can figure. Yeah, I've never seen that done before, Tatum, but that's actually good. All right, I'm going to pull this over so y'all can see what Tatum did. Yeah, that is 6 pens. She made 4 triangles there. Starting out with a square. Got 1 triangle over here. Oh, those are nice sneakers. Oh, so you almost got 2, but you only got 2 pencils left.
Oh, no, this is.
Oh, okay, so you made 2 with those 6. Okay, what you'll notice that people are doing with this example, though, is they're thinking 2-dimensionally. Do we have to do this 2-dimensionally, or can we do 3-dimensional? Well, the answer is yes. That's the example that we have here. We have 6 matches, but they're in a tent formation. So we have a triangle over here, a triangle over here, a triangle at the base, and also a triangle at the forefront. So it is three-dimensional. And so a lot of people try to do it two-dimensionally, and they often don't find the answer. I've never seen like the one that Tatum did. So that's divergent there. But this is what they were looking. All right, the next example of a problem where you can use convergent or divergent thinking. You have these materials. You have a bunch of matches, you have a candle, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 thumbtacks. Using the materials shown, how would you mount the candle up on the wall? Does anyone have an idea? Okay, so instead of having functional fixedness of, oh, the box is just a container for the matches, if you think outside the box, pun intended, and you use it as a shelf rather than as just a container, you can use it to mount the box to the bulletin board using the tacks, and then just put the candle upright and use the melted wax to keep it centered. Okay, so this idea that a box doesn't always have to be a container, but instead you can use it for other functions is divergent thinking. So the issue with heuristics is that they are shortcuts that are efficient, but they're not always 100% right. And we also depend on them very heavily. So if we think that we have a solution that's familiar, we're not likely to get creative. And sometimes problems require that creativity. But have you ever heard of someone being set in their ways? Well, our brain can have mental sets just like a person can have habits. Okay, we have a tendency to approach problems in a way that we've done before. Okay, so if we've already done it this way, we're going to continue doing it that way. That's why some people respond with, well, why do we always do it this way? Because it's always been done that way. Why try something new if this is a solution? Okay, if that way has been successful in the past, then we're going to keep using that method. Okay, and we see that a lot in education. Let's see, if you're trying to teach a student how to write, okay, like Coach Colvin told me about this when he first started as an English teacher. He thought that the way to get kids to learn how to write was to make them keep writing. They just keep writing over and over and over again. So practice makes perfect, right? Well, no, because when he kept getting all those essays, he didn't have time to grade them and give them feedback before they took another essay. So they kept making the same mistakes over and over again because they hadn't gotten feedback as in like, oh, you should indent your paragraphs, or oh, you shouldn't use present tense. All right, so he had this mental set of, well, the way I learned how to write was I just kept having essays thrown at me until I figured it out. Well, that didn't work in this case. He was just getting people more stuck in their ways of how they were writing because he wasn't able to give them feedback in a fast enough fashion. What do you mean by waking up early, Trace?
Like school making us like, they think it's like, they're set in their ways of making us wake up early rather than trying new stuff.
That's a good point. Okay, that's an excellent point. Okay, so why did they have students wake up so early, and why do we have summers off? Because it used to be that children worked on the farms. Children worked with the family to help support the family. Okay, so you would have to be done with school early in the afternoon so you can go home and help out at home. We don't have that anymore. So why do we continue to do it? Why do we start at the butt crack of dawn every day, despite the science? Because that's just the way it is. So that's the way we're going to do it. All right. So again, we've already talked about functional fixedness a little bit. This is where we don't see a new use for an object, where we just say, oh, this is the purpose of this object, so this is the only way we could use this object. Okay. So in this example, this woman is trying to reach this rope, but clearly she can't reach it without letting go of this rope. Well, over here, you see a pincher set. So she may see these pliers and think, oh, that's for pulling things out of the wall, or I don't know what you use pliers for. She may not think, that is a way to extend my reach. Okay, so she could take those pliers and she could like still hold this rope and go over to this counter and then take them to grab this rope and attach to it if she wants to swing it from one direction to another. So this extends her reach. But if she doesn't think of it as an arm extender, then she's not going to have the divergent idea of using it for a different purpose. Okay, now this is a fun thing. This is going to be the last thing we do. This is a fun thing that I do with the people who identify as male in the class. Okay, girls don't answer. Okay, but men, what do you think this is for? It is for makeup, but what about makeup? You don't know. Okay, yeah, so like I love just showing people who identify as male their whole lives, like makeup. And I'm like, okay, what is this? And it says lip liner. And they're like, why do you need lip liner? Okay, but what could you use these for instead of just blotting your makeup and blending your makeup? Well, you may use it as a sponge to wash your dishes. Let's say that you run out of sponges for your dishes, and so you're like, oh man, I have to go buy more. I can't do my dishes. No, you could use this for that. Okay, so that kind of functional fixedness of using something for more than just its explicit purpose, finding another way to use it. Modern problems require modern solutions. Good, Arlesia. See, memes can be related to anything in our curriculum. All right, so along with mental sets, and that's the idea where you're set in your way, where you try to approach a problem in the same way that you've solved the problem previously, bias can make heuristics illogical. Okay, because remember, heuristics aren't 100% accurate. Algorithms are accurate because you go through each possible answer before choosing the correct one. Heuristics are shortcuts, and so they're more open to illogical thinking. Okay, so hindsight bias. Y'all, if y'all have ever heard the phrase hindsight is 2020, okay, that's looking at after an event has happened. You may have had this like, oh, I knew it all along sort of phenomenon, like when I first met her, I knew I was going to marry her, that kind of idea. Well, this is our tendency to second guess that decision after the event has already happened and we already know what's going to happen. So if you've ever been watching like a TV show like Law and Order and you're like, that guy's the murderer, and then it turns out they are the murderer and you're like, I knew it all along. Well, that's hindsight bias. Okay, the idea that you're overconfident in being right. Whereas if the guy hadn't been the murderer, if he had been innocent, you wouldn't have even remembered guessing that he was the murderer in the first place. You would just put that away as, oh, I was wrong. Let's not look at that again. Yeah, we definitely didn't have 20/20 vision last year. It was just one fresh horror after another. I was not having a Baja blast. Representative bias is a shortcut for judging the likelihood of things on prototypes. Okay, and this can also refer to stereotypes. For instance, if you're walking into a freshman class, you're in college, and the very first day, the professor says, hey, you have a group project, you have to pick your partners now, and you don't know anybody in the class. Okay, your representative bias for picking a group member may be, okay, I want somebody who is smart. So you may say, who is a nerd, quote unquote, or who is a smart person? What are representative biases that we can use? Well, one, glasses. Okay, so wait, what was this class, Trace? Any class. Let's just say it's like something with a group project. I don't know, Comp 101. But group projects are the devil. So with this, you may look around the class and you know 0 people. Okay, you're out of state, for instance. How are you going to pick your group members that you're going to have for the rest of the semester and makes up a large percentage of your grade? Okay, you may pick somebody who has glasses because you have a representative bias of, oh, smart people have glasses. That's how they're portrayed in movies. That's how they're portrayed in TV episodes. Okay, but does because a person wears glasses necessarily mean that they're intelligent? No, I just can't see good. Okay, I'm not that smart. I'm just blind. Okay, so that's not always accurate, hence it being a heuristic instead of an algorithm. Okay, and we have the same thing with stereotypes as well. Tall people versus short people, women versus men, racism, sexism, all of those things go back to representative bias, which we're going to talk about when we get to the unit on social psychology. Okay, the availability bias is when we take flashbulb moments, okay, and we think that they're more likely to happen than they actually are. So estimating the likelihood of events based on availability and memory. Okay, so since I grew up in the age of 9/11, like I was alive when 9/11 happened, okay, airplane crashes is a huge flashbulb moment in my life. So if I get on an airplane, maybe I'm going to be a little bit nervous about it falling, or crashing, because I remember big major events where that happened. Okay, for y'all's generations, it may be more so school shootings. Okay, so even though our likelihood of dying in an airplane crash is much, much less likely than dying in a car crash, okay, we tend to think of airplane crashes as more vividly due to the high number of people that are likely to die in an airplane crash. Or if you watch Law and Order SVU a lot, okay, you might just be like, I'm going to skip going to New York City. Okay, I've seen Law and Order and it sounds dangerous. Well, does that necessarily mean that New York City is more dangerous than any other city in the United States? No, it's just that it's commonly portrayed as that in the Law and Order series. And so you start making an availability bias. And you might start thinking, oh, big city equals big crime. And that's not necessarily true. Hence it being a heuristic or a shortcut. Oh, Trent, I got your joke now. It says that was this class. I haven't given you any group projects yet because I don't believe in group projects. I think I only gave one group project the entire time I've been a teacher. And I hated it. All right, so overconfidence. That is another bias that we have where we tend to believe that we are more accurate than we actually are. Okay, nobody holds a belief that they know is false, right? That's the whole point of beliefs, is you genuinely believe it's true. There's nobody who's of a certain religion because they're just like, I don't know, whatever. Okay, then they're called not practicing. Okay, if you're into Scientology, then you're really into Scientology, right? And so this is our belief that we are more likely to have good ideas or true ideas than somebody else, okay? Which can lead to a lot of issues. Like if you've ever been sure that you knew the meaning of a word, and so you argue with somebody over the meaning of the word, okay? And then you find out later you're wrong, and then you're just like really embarrassed. That could be an example of that overconfidence. And that also opens up to confirmation bias because we want to avoid cognitive dissonance. That uncomfortable feeling when what we believe is challenged, okay? And that's so uncomfortable that we want to avoid it at all costs. So new evidence is too uncomfortable to accept, and so we ignore it. Okay, framing. Framing can change your interaction with an idea. It's the way an issue is posed, and so that framing can change your decisions. For instance, if you're trying to buy food and it says it's 25% fat with ground beef or 75% lean, which one do you think is more appealing to consumers? Yeah, lean, because if you say, oh, 75% lean, you think, oh, that must be healthy, right? Where in reality, 25% fat, you're like, oh, that's 1/4 fat. That's gross, but it's also delicious. Same thing when you look at fruit juice, right? You may look at fruit juice and think, oh, this is healthy. It has pictures of fruit on it. But then on the dietary information, it says 0% real juice. So if it's not juice, then what is it? Okay, but you see that framing of look at all of these yummy vegetables, healthy looking vegetables that are on the advertisement, so thus it must be healthy, or things that market themselves as healthy, but they're very high in added sugars, okay? But the framing of the issue can change our opinion of the issue. So we already go in with this preconceived notion. It's like when somebody really likes somebody and ignores the red flags. Yeah, exactly. That's the cognitive dissonance that we're talking about. Like a confirmation bias. You're going to ignore anything that goes against what you already believe. So if you have a crush on this guy, you may ignore the way he talks to his mother. Okay? Even though that should be a big red flag. If someone's disrespectful to their mama in front of you, then how do you think they're going to treat you? Right? And so some people are like, oh, well, he's really nice to me right now, so he's disrespecting his mom, but I'm going to ignore those red flags because it gets in the way of my crush. All right. So belief bias, this is the tendency for pre-existing beliefs to distort logical reasoning. So this deals with the anchoring effect. With the anchoring effect, the first information that we come into contact with is going to stay more strongly in our mind, even if contradicting evidence comes out later. Okay, so let's say, for instance, that you were alive during the time the anti-vax autism report came out, where it said, oh, autism is caused by vaccines. Well, if you read that article, okay, and you agree with it, then any evidence to the contrary coming afterwards is not going to be able to displace that anchor that you already have. Okay, so you've already come into information that you believed was true, and so it gets basically pressed into the mold of your mind. And so it's very difficult to dislodge something that is the first information you come in contact with. That's why it's so difficult to break patterns that are established in childhood. Okay, if you believed everything that your parents said early on in life, okay, it's going to be very difficult to displace those ideas later. Like, say, for instance, political affiliations. What are kids most likely to be when they're going through like middle school? They're going to correspond with the political beliefs of their parents. So they may not even know what they're talking about when they're saying, oh, so-and-so is a good president or so-and-so is a bad speaker, whatever. They're just repeating things they heard at home because they haven't formed their own opinions yet. Okay, so it's that anchoring effect. But then they're likely to continue the beliefs of their parents even into adulthood due to the strength of that belief bias. Okay, so this can lead to invalid conclusions seeming like they're true, or truth seeming like it's false. Belief perseverance is clinging to your initial conceptions even after they've been proven wrong. This deals with cognitive dissonance and that we want to avoid that uncomfortable feeling, but it also relates to justification of effort. Justification of effort is when we tell ourselves we must like something or must love something because we've put in so much effort. We've already worked really hard for this thing, so it must have been worth the effort. Okay, say so for instance, if you've been married to somebody for 25 years, but you no longer want to be in a relationship with them. Well, you may justify the effort by saying, well, we've been together for so long that it wouldn't make any sense to divorce them now. Okay? Or if you have a car that you've been putting a lot of money into, but it keeps breaking down, you may continue putting money into that car, even though the sunken cost fallacy tells you that, hey, you should stop continuing to put money in this car. It might be cheaper in the long run just to get a new car because of that justification of effort. Or if you go to school and you start a major and you're already 3 years in before you decide, I really don't want to be a guidance school counselor, but you've already done 3 years and you don't want to have to switch majors and delay your graduation. So you say, well, I've worked really hard to become a high school guidance counselor, so I must want to be a high school guidance counselor. It's that justification of effort of we justify that the result was worth the effort because we don't want to have that uncomfortable feeling of we've wasted our time or our resources.